We are thrilled to welcome today's keynote speaker, Mr. Bryan McMath, Executive Administrator of the Texas Water Development Board, and I heard he was a past Olympian sprinter, 100-yard dash. Ask him about that later. Before becoming the Executive Administrator, Bryan served as the Director of Government Relations and has worked closely with groundwater districts across the state. He's also a familiar face here at the summit, having presented with us before. Please join me in welcoming Bryan to the stage.
Thanks, Stephanie and Adam, for having me. I apologize I couldn't sprint to the stage. I'm recovering from a hamstring injury. But if it comes as a surprise that I am a former Olympian sprinter, you clearly have not noticed my Olympian physique. So some of you who know me better, and especially those of you who we've met or gotten to know each other better here at this event, may have heard me call the TAG Groundwater Summit described as pound for pound, one of, if not the best, conference in the annual cycle. Now, I say that as no disrespect to TWA, formerly TWCA conferences. Those are great. Those are like networking bonanzas. And of course, we have a conference that gets put on every couple years, and I've heard great reviews of that conference for the diversity of topics and speakers and issues. But there's something about the TAG Groundwater Summit, and just pound for pound, I hate to have favorites, but man, it's a great conference. So Adam, your staff, thank you for all y'all do to make this such a wonderful event. So Adam requested a few months ago, just kind of at the end of session, he approached me about being a keynote speaker at this year's summit. And my immediate response after I said, me? Are you sure you've got the right guy? I asked him, well, what do you want me to talk about? And Adam made a very dangerous response. He said, Bryan, you can talk about whatever you want. Stephanie mentioned that I've been up on this stage before, and unfortunately, I went a little off script. It was following the 23 session. I was up here with Leah and Hope and Sarah Kirkle, and I started just ad-libbing nicknames for various bills that were passed, and there was a prohibited technology bill that those of you who were here a couple years ago may remember I called the TikTok Boohoo Poo-Poo Bill. That's going to be the least safe for work comment we'll have here today. I'm not going to refer to poo-poo anymore, even though I just did. But it is kind of a precursor to this keynote. May be a little different than your typical keynote. I know yesterday y'all heard from Chief Justice Hecht, and I'm sure I was unfortunately traveling yesterday from a different event I was at yesterday morning here, and I was able to turn a 3-hour drive from Houston to San Antonio into about 7 hours because I kept having to pull over and get on my phone and look at my phone and do work. And so I set the world record for longest drive from Houston yesterday. So I wasn't able to hear Chief Justice's comments, but I got a recap, and I know he went into in-depth some of the legal underpinnings of how we understand current groundwater law, and he may have kind of reflected on past decisions, and if he had that decision to make again today, would he have made the same decision? Sounds very interesting, but I just kind of figured that was a pretty serious talk, and maybe a little more lighthearted presentation would be in order for today. So before we get to that part, I would be remiss if I didn't recognize a few people who have contributed not just in my career and understanding of the groundwater space, but of course, personally. So there's kind of a current group, and I'm going to name some names, and I've, one of like Public Speaking 101. As soon as you start naming names, you're going to leave somebody off the list. So if you're off the list, I apologize. Know that you also have a special place in my heart. I just forgot to write your name down in pencil. But I know yesterday Ty Embry had a group up here, and Ty and I go way back. He's been really helpful to me over the years, and I hope I've been helpful to him. Dirk Aaron, I think we all, let's give him a shout out. After, I think, 14 years, he's on the cusp of retirement. So if you have any work around your house that you need an extra hand with, Dirk's your guy. Leah Martinson, past General Manager, Executive Director. Help me out with your title. Yeah, ED of TAG. Sarah Schlesinger, former TAG ED as well. Brittany Britton, I see her in the crowd. We were Texas water leaders together at the Water Foundation. My nickname, I like to nickname things. My nickname for Brittany Britton is Brit Brit. So, and then kind of a crowd of legends, so to speak, in the groundwater space that I had the privilege of knowing when I worked at the Capitol. That was shortly after my Olympic career. C.E. Williams, Janet Guthrie, she's still here, so she's kind of a living legend, so to speak. Greg Ellis, I know he's here. Greg and I, when I first started working at the board about 7 years ago, I was at the groundwater committee at then TWCA, and it got to Q&A time. And Greg hit me with the most impossible legal groundwater question ever. And I was like, leave it to Greg Ellis to throw out the most challenging question. So I was like, I have no idea, dude. But we just wrote down a bunch of questions, and I was able to get back to everybody later. So, but someone who I'm very close with personally and professionally, Bryan Sledge. I know many of you know him, and he's contributed so much to the groundwater space. Bryan, 30 years ago when we were both starting our careers, I guess this was probably around 20 years ago when I started focusing on groundwater when I worked for Senator Seliger. We would get together pretty regularly at the Doubletree right by the Capitol, have breakfast, and he would give these groundwater 101s. And so that was kind of the beginning of my, not just understanding of the groundwater space, but frankly, my love of groundwater policy. It is, I find, to be one of, if not the most fascinating, intriguing aspects of water policy and water management. So I know it's also kind of drives us all crazy at times, but I think we're privileged to work in this space and to work on such an interesting topic. So thank you all for everyone that I mentioned and those of you who I so thoughtlessly forgot. So apologies there. So here's the lighthearted part. And again, I'm kind of referencing another unofficial public speaking moment. Different TWCA conference, but same groundwater committee. There was some extra time. And Drew Satterwhite, who was running that committee at the time, I had kind of joked with him on the way in, like, hey, you gonna tell any jokes? And he was like, no. Why are you? And I kind of dared him, semi-dared him. I was like, well, I got one. And those of you who I've worked with at the Water Board know that I've threatened or kind of joked about making a joke about the three strings for a long time. And so today, we're going to tell that joke. So bear with me, because it is relevant, and I know a sophisticated audience like I look out upon right now will understand its relevance as the joke progresses. Now, this is one of those jokes, pun intended, that you can kind of string along, but I'm going to give you the somewhat abbreviated version. So there are three strings, and they're lost in the desert. And they've been lost for several days, and as you would imagine, these 3 strings are not only hungry and tired, but they're incredibly thirsty. On about the 3rd or 4th day of being lost in this desert, they look up ahead and can't believe their eyes to see in the middle of the desert a bar. So they rush up to the bar, to the door, and much to their dismay, there is a big sign across the door that says, "Sorry, no strings allowed." You can imagine their disappointment. The first string wasn't so easily discouraged, and so, being a very polite young string, walked into the bar, asked for 3 waters to go, please, and was met by a grumpy bartender that said, "Hey, buddy, can't you read? No strings allowed." Kicked him out. Well, the second string didn't take kindly to that treatment, so the second string got a little upset. Walked in up to that same bar, slammed his fist down, and said, "Hey, I need 3 waters. I need them now. I need them to go." Bartender looked at that string and said, "Man, you're as dumb as your buddy." Kicked him out too. So the third string, you'd seen his first string, couldn't get it done. The polite approach, second string, tried to bully his way. That didn't work. The third string got an idea. Tied himself up, messed up his hair, walked in, kind of half polite, firm but gentle, said, "I need 3 waters to go, please." Bartender looked at him. "Aren't you a string?" "Afraid not." So I appreciate the wah, 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 wah response, right? Because that is like, the ultimate wah, wah, wah joke. It's a dad joke. I'm not a dad, I'm a dog dad. My dog thinks that joke is hilarious. So for those of you who didn't think it was so funny. But if you think about it, the reason I wanted to tell that joke is, where's that water coming from? It's not surface water. They're in the middle of a desert. It's got to be groundwater. So that, stretch as it may be, is the relevance of the 3-string joke for today's keynote. The rest of my presentation will have very little to do with said joke, but I wanted to provide some updates that I think will be very interesting and relevant to all of you. As mentioned, after my storied Olympic career, I worked at the Capitol for a while. I started working at the board about 7 years ago, and up until about a year and a half ago, I did government relations. And those of you who have been at the Capitol or have perhaps a government relations background will understand that one of the tricks of that trade is to come bearing gifts. And so I hope that some of this information you can see the gift bearing in this information. So those of you who don't spend your idle time studying our budget bill pattern may not know, but we get money for groundwater science. So we have, as I'm sure you all know, a continued need to collect information and data to improve our, and I don't say our in the sense of the Water Development Board, our Texas's efforts to model groundwater resources, to characterize our brackish groundwater resources. And I'm sure, as you all know keenly, especially those of you in areas that aren't quote-unquote data-rich, that persistent data gaps include pumping locations, pumping volumes, aquifer properties, quantification of groundwater, surface water interaction for GAM calibrations. All these data gaps, I would suggest, hamper our ability to do what we're paid to do, to manage this precious resource. So 2 areas that the Water Development Board gets with respect to science funding are BRACS, the Brackish Resource Aquifer Characterization System. I think I got that right. Thumbs up from John Dupnick. And our groundwater modeling. And we have a rider in our budget that appropriates money to conduct studies for, again, BRACS and groundwater modeling. And these support our in-house efforts. So what I wanted to do is just give you a quick update on those two things, and then I've got a few more gifts. So our groundwater modeling, we recently received nearly $1.7 million. We get that each biennium. Biennium is a 2-year cycle, and so this $1.7 million is for the FY 26-27 biennium. We've gotten that amount since about 2020, and we use that to contract studies to support groundwater modeling. Our initial funding back in 2001 was a little less, 1.6 million, and it's kind of varied over the years, but it averages about 1.8. I mention all that because as we were doing research for this keynote, staff recognized that, there's a pattern here. We're spending about the same amount for model development that we did in the early 2000s. So I'll let you draw your own conclusions, but last time I filled up my tank with gas or went to the grocery store or paid my utility bill, there was a noticeable trend since 2000. Yet we're still trying to do the same, or if we can, more with the same amount of resources. So the BRACs, again, brackish characterization, also receives about 1.7 million. I don't have as much detailed history on that, but I think it was mentioned in an earlier panel, and I know John Dupnick and some others have a panel tomorrow, I think with Adam, on BRACs and brackish groundwater and the opportunities that our brackish aquifers could provide. But we do use those for studies. We have about 840,000 right now. We can look at BRAC studies, but interestingly, by legislation, we can't look at the Dockham aquifer. So that's kind of some science funding we get. I hope that's helpful. If you are interested in learning more of the results of some of those studies, I'm sure you all know Natalie Ballou and her very capable team in our groundwater division. I'm sure many of you also know John Dupnick. They'd be willing, I'm sure happy to tell you more about what those studies are looking like and point you to the direction of finding that information, should that be helpful. So the next thing I'd like to mention, so for the last couple biennial cycles since 2023 and now again here in 2025, again, Natalie's team in our groundwater division, many of them are here today, so make sure to introduce yourselves. It's always good to have friends in the groundwater division at the Water Board. But we solicit from stakeholders project ideas, and we use those funds I mentioned earlier. We do kind of an anonymous Microsoft form online. We send out an email, and we solicit ideas for those studies. So a couple takeaways here. If you have ideas, if you have data gaps that you would like for us to study using these resources, don't be shy. Respond to Natalie's email or fill out the form online. But I also wanted to provide you with a quick recap of what we've gotten in recently. So we got 28 responses this recent solicitation. The themes, so we kind of put these in themes. So we've got a brackish groundwater assessment, management, and desal. We have a groundwater modeling and aquifer characterization. We've got some climate resilience and recharge enhancements, and some hydrogeological investigations. So what we do is we compare these submitted ideas with kind of the internal needs of our agency and the groundwater division to decide what projects to pursue with, again, this contracted funding. So to drill down a little bit, I think someone earlier mentioned, might have been on the last panel, that Andy Weir and Sarah, I think we're on, and Sledge. There was an AI bill. I don't think it passed. But obviously AI is kind of our new online best friend, right? Best being potentially a stretch. But we used an AI tool to give you a little deeper dive on some of those submissions. So again, that first theme, brackish groundwater assessment, management, and desalination. So we kind of characterized them, again, based on internal needs. We kind of labeled them high priority and medium priority. But if I could, I'd like to share a little more details. So we've got one on technical, economic, and environmental assessment of brackish groundwater desalination in Texas. The focus will be to reduce energy use, cost, and environmental impact. We have one on assessing brackish groundwater utilization for agricultural resilience in drought-prone regions, with a focus on ag use of brackish water, pilot treatment systems, and economic modeling. We've got one on evaluating managed aquifer recharge potential using brackish water for strategic drought reserves. And the focus there will be on the use of treated brackish water for aquifer recharge. And then a final high priority idea we received, evaluating sustainable brackish groundwater production potential for aquifers in Wilson, Atascosa, Guadalupe, Gonzales, and Caldwell counties. The focus would be on sustainable extraction, aquifer characterization, and modeling for future use. In the interest of time, I'll skip over the medium priorities under that topic or theme, but the next theme, groundwater modeling and aquifer characterization. We've got Comal County Trinity Aquifer Characterization and Volumetric Study with the focus on aquifer volume, recharge, production estimates for Comal County. We've got an integration, of climate projections and with groundwater available models, long-term planning use of climate-adjusted recharge and aquifer yield estimates, incorporating ag water use efficiency strategies into groundwater modeling. The focus here would be on modeling aquifer savings from conservation practices, improved groundwater models for NTV GCD, I believe that's the Natchez, help me out, John, Trinity Valley GCD, thank you. I had to phone a friend there. That focus would be on updating aquifer properties and calibration for better model accuracy. And then a final kind of high priority idea, socioeconomic impacts of groundwater pumpage, looking at the linkage of pumpage to economic damage and mitigation costs. So I know some districts are really interested in that. So the climate resilience and recharge enhancement, I'm going to speed up and I'm trying to be sensitive to time. We've got a quantitative climate change-driven alterations of groundwater recharge using space-based hydrologic observations, a lot of big words there. Developing a near real-time information platform for monitoring and assessing groundwater recharge from playa wetlands, and then a solar-powered groundwater desalination for municipal and irrigation use in arid Texas regions. So some pretty interesting topics. And then our final theme, the hydrogeological investigations. Apparently none of these ideas made the high priority cut, but we have a medium priority idea about groundwater interaction potential between the middle and lower Trinity in the Hill Country. So that was a lot of information all at once. If you're interested to learn more about any of these ideas, again, we've just got the idea list yet. The next phase will be kind of looking at these ideas, trying to match them with our priorities and seeing which ones we can go forward with. I will say that some of the topics we received might be a little too local to serve, our programmatic needs, but there may be an opportunity, all is not lost, for districts to apply for grant funding to pursue those efforts. And that's the final gift I come bearing. I would be remiss if I didn't recognize the incredible efforts over the last couple years. Vanessa Williams, I know Leah Martinson helped. I know Vanessa got I see Carlos here. another living legend. He was working with Vanessa 2 sessions ago on some riders to this effect. But the House Bill 1400 that wasn't House Bill 1400 grants that because the bill didn't pass, well, fortunately, and I have to recognize Ross Giesinger, I think, had a lot of behind-the-scenes efforts to secure that $7.5 million that's coming to us. We can use a little bit of that to pay a couple people for a couple years, but most of that money is going out the door. And that should be very good news. Unfortunately, I can't tell you yet when that door will be open for said funds to go out of. We're not quite ready to dole those grants out. But we are working through some internal questions and processes, likely through the end of this summer. Eligible projects. We have a good idea of what types of projects districts may apply for. We've done some stakeholder research, idea solicitation, and I think Adam and TAG did a survey earlier this year. So all that information is very helpful. If you've got some late-breaking bright ideas, don't be shy. Let Natalie and her team know. But we will inform districts soon of our plans as we're able, so please stay tuned. The final mention before I conclude is about an incredible resource, and if you haven't stopped by the table out in the foyer, the Texas Water Data Hub table. Taylor Christian, I know she may be here in the room. She may still be at the table. I'm sure there's a long line of people wanting to know more. But the Texas Water Hub, or Data Hub, excuse me, is an incredible new resource that we've been working on for the past few years. You can access GAMs there along with aquifer boundary information and other valuable data sets. Participation is voluntary, but we're always looking for more organizations to partner with. And so we would love for groundwater conservation districts to engage on that effort. So if you're interested to know more, please see Taylor. Sam Hermit's here. She knows all about it. It's very near and dear to her heart. But please, if you're so inclined, please help us develop this important statewide water resources data network. That's, again, the Texas Water Data Hub. And we've got some cool magnets and other bling or swag or whatever you call it to remind you of the importance of the Water Hub. So our end goal, I think we all share an end goal of having, and I'm kind of borrowing from one of our mantras at the board when I say, better data leads to better science. That can, bit of a fork in the road, that can lead to better policy or better planning, ultimately leading to better projects. We're no more, so let me back up. Those better projects, more efficient use of this precious resource that we know as water, specifically groundwater. If we all commit ourselves to that end goal, I would like to suggest that my wah dad joke could go away. Because that bar in the middle of the desert arguably had that sign up there because they knew there was a bunch of thirsty strings getting lost in the desert, drinking all their water. Maybe we can all envision a future where that bar doesn't have that unwelcoming sign, and those 3 thirsty strings will be welcome to drink all the water that they need. So with that, if we have time, I'm happy to open it up for questions. We have an all-agency meeting at the board where this part of the program is usually called Stump the Chump. I'm being the chump. So if you got some questions, I'm happy to take them. If not, I'll be here the rest of the conference, so you're welcome to introduce yourself and happy to chat at your convenience. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Bryan. Do we have any quick questions for Bryan?
It can be about all things Water Development Board. Another living legend.
Yeah,
Kramer.
speaking of
Forgot
legends.
to mention Ken.
I'm still going to ask you a question.
Please do.
So, obviously, the voters haven't spoken yet on Prop 4, but assuming they do affirmatively vote for the constitutional amendment, your agency's not going to have total flexibility in how you allocate the money from the Texas Water Fund, but you're going to have a fair amount of flexibility, more so than some of the versions of Senate Bill 7 would have given you. Can you give us any insight at this point as to what criteria or factors are going to affect how that money is going to be allocated among the different funds?
Absolutely. I appreciate the question, Ken. So to kind of catch everybody up, 2 years ago in 2023, with the creation of the Water Fund, Texas Water Fund, the legislature appropriated $1 billion at that time into the Water Fund. This most recent regular session, they allocated a little more than $1 billion, appropriated a little more than $1 billion, which I've nicknamed the new billion to differentiate it from the first billion. But interestingly, the legislature appropriated that to the Water Development Board. They didn't specifically appropriate it into the Water Fund. I mention that because history often informs the present and the future. And so for those of you curious on how those new billion of dollars could be allocated, you might take a look at the implementation plan from the first billion under the Water Fund. Now, there's some distinct key differences. That money was deliberately not put in the Water Fund, and so our board could have some additional flexibility. We're actually working right now with leadership in the legislature, some other state agencies to clarify that path forward to make sure that those dollars are not only available, but we're allocating them appropriately. Won't speak any more about that because it's just boring, mechanical conversations. But I testified repeatedly, have discussed with our board. I know Director Miller's here somewhere in the crowd. She'll be grading my paper later, so hopefully I do okay. But, we testified all last session about the incredible need that we see throughout the water, wastewater, and flood space. Our various programs are almost all oversubscribed. And we talked about pressing needs and how, any additional resources, should they be discretionary, can, be very helpful in addressing those pressing needs. Now comes the hard part of figuring out which pressing need is the most pressing need. And I can assure you that is something that we consider very seriously and thoroughly, but that seriousness, that the thoroughness doesn't alleviate how challenging that effort can be. So what you'll see in the near future is some public documents that are shared requesting input. And I know, Ken, you're a very reliable source of public input. I would encourage you to tell all your friends and everyone here, be on the lookout for that, because we rely so heavily on stakeholder input to inform our decisions. We know how important these decisions are. So if you haven't signed up for our email updates on our website, I encourage you to do so. That way you're in the loop. And forward them to all your water friends. And our ears are open when it comes to helping us make sure that we're on the right path. So I hope that's helpful. Now, with the dedicated revenue that's going to kick in a few years, about half of that's fully discretionary. The other half we can use for the new water supply fund for Texas, which I keep calling the NEWT. It's kind of catching on, so if you care to join me in that effort, I'd appreciate it. And the SWIFT, but that $500 million a year pending voter approval, pending sales tax revenues being over $46.5 billion. That'll kind of go 50-50, discretionary and towards new water supply. So I hope that's helpful. Any other questions? Stump the chump. You guys are 0 for 1. I answered the question. Nobody stumped me yet. Come on. All right. Oh, Grayson, he's going to ask me about ping pong.
No ping pong related questions. Thanks, Bryan.
No, that's all right. I'm the former ping pong champion at the board. Really am.
The charity.
The Olympian sprinter thing was a total farce, but I really did win one of our ping pong tournaments.
Well, thank you, Bryan. My question for you is, you mentioned solicitations. There are 28 solicitations, and you organize them by priority. I'm assuming many of those are not going to be selected, and even the ones that are high priority, there's probably more than $1.7 million. They cost more than $1.7 million to complete. So I guess, what is your strategy to address all these high priorities and get this work done within a time frame, a reasonable time frame? And will some of these ideas be pushed into the future, or how will you keep these things in a queue for the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, Grayson. I'll have to rely somewhat on Natalie and her staff to fully articulate the steps of going forward. But within our available resources, we will contract out some of those 28 submissions, but clearly not all. But again, thanks to some tireless efforts last session to get some additional grant money, some of the entities, the districts that propose those study ideas can come back later for that roughly $3.5 million a year in grants and realize some of those studies utilizing those dollars. So we're super fortunate that, again, Vanessa and Carlos and Leah and Ross were so successful in getting that money because, again, it goes to those data gaps, getting better science so that we understand that mysterious and occult resource that we all know as groundwater. I think that answered your question. I got a thumbs up, so we'll say that I didn't get stumped there either. But certainly if you need more information on that, Natalie's here, so I'm sure she'd be happy to discuss. I know she's got to run back to later today for a hearing tomorrow, so hopefully she's still around. So, all right. Okay. Well, thank you all very much. Like I said, I'll be around, so happy to make new friends.